This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leader, today I'm honored to have Rand Selig back on the show. I almost messed up there because I said on the show, but he's back on the show because he was here a couple months ago. And we talked about his book, Thriving. We talked about how to design your life, editing your own story, and balancing, not balancing, but integrating work and life to help you out, and some of the tools that we use there. And today we're going to continue that conversation and talk more about some of the other things that are of interest. Anyway, before we get started into all that, Rand, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today, and what is it exactly that you do?
Well, thanks, John. It's great to be back here with you. I have run my own firm for over 3 decades. I started with major firms, spent 10 years on Wall Street, and then I realized I really was an entrepreneur, and I didn't like meetings. So that propelled me with a lot of thinking and a lot of consideration of what principles I wanted to have my company honor. And so I started that. And along the way, one of the principles was that I wanted to contribute to my community, and I wanted to be part of my family life, my children's life as they were growing up. And so that had to do with a commute. I said, I don't want to do a big commute. I'm willing to live in my little town and not have an address in the financial district in San Francisco. And so I was a Little League coach. I was a Scoutmaster, and I served on 18 boards so far in my career. I saw a lot of people. I worked with a lot of people. I've completed over 250 transactions, very complicated business transactions for companies, mostly private companies. So I've met a lot of people, and I've seen so many elements of what causes them to get confused or stuck or go through transitions. And so my book and my work now, my primary mission is engaging with people about those kinds of topics.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's one of the things that I really liked about talking to you is you started out with, focusing on what's important. And, I had the same thing when I was looking for the job that I'm in now. I had a checklist, and one of the things was not a long commute. I wanted to be able to get home in time to spend time with the family and the kids and not have to worry about, spending hours, in traffic and missing out on opportunities. And a lot of the middle school sports, like my daughter does track, and sometimes the track events start at 4:30, and if you can't leave work early or hit traffic, or if you're, an hour commute away, you're going to miss the whole thing. So I think that's really
important. I think it's one of the sad elements to a lot of people's lives in the United States today is they do have the long commute. And it's kind of almost not to use too big a psychological word, but it's kind of schizophrenic. They've got 2 lives, almost by definition. There's the go off to work, you live over there, you work over there, you may be paying attention to what's going on in that place. Then you have a long drive home, you're tired, and you're not plugged into what's going on in your local community. You don't know maybe who the mayor is or, what's going on in the schools. And that's a disruption. It's hard physically, and it just doesn't allow people to plug in the way that I think is really helpful.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's, really interesting when you talked last time on the show about integrating work and life balance. Because a lot of people will, you mentioned schizophrenia, but they'll turn off their home life when they come to work, and then try to turn off their work life when they come home. But there's always that bleed over, it never completely happens, because you're the same person, even though, when in Rome, you act like the Romans or whatever. Yeah. Even though that's true, you still have those same core values and the same core beliefs. And, you know, if if I'm, at work and my boss really like, pisses me off or something happens and I have a bad day, I'll come home and every now and then that'll bleed over and I'll be like, a little quick to anger instead of slow to anger, and I'll have to like reset myself and think about reset my perspectives. Um, how is it that we can kind of work on that a little bit better so that being the same person in both places, but also not having things carry over sometimes?
Well, it's a very personal kind of set of things, and
Mhm.
just first of all, of course, noticing that it's happening. Maybe fuel up a little bit before you get home. I remember when I had an office in San Francisco, and if I wasn't flying off to a client, I'd be taking the bus. It was a great bus. I'd get home and I'd have about a half mile walk to get from the bus to my house, and I be carrying my briefcase, which had papers that I'd be reading on the bus. And by the time I got home, I was settled. I was a lot more that super silly conversation I had with whoever during the day, that was in the background. It didn't bleed out. So that's one thing. Just to be aware, know what's going on. Maybe fuel up a little bit. Drink some water. Something very simple to do. It's amazing how much water can make a difference. So that'd be one thing. Another is, of course, if you can have less of a commute. Wow, so much better. I mean, the world we're living in now is very different than 10 years ago. More and more people are able to do a good job by having home office, and the companies are allowing that. Now, obviously, it doesn't exist for everybody. It's not possible, and more companies are saying, "No, we need to have you here." And those are the rules, and that's somewhat understandable. But when you have the choice to have that shorter commute, to have the choice of working at home, and you can manage yourself well, that's really something to appreciate. And it may be that you don't get as big a compensation package. You're making a trade off there. You're saying if I go in to the longer commute, I get X dollars more. But if I don't have that commute, I can do more work at home. I get a call it a haircut. That might be worth it. It
Yeah.
might be worth it. It's your life. It's your life, and it's going by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, everything has a trade-off, right? There's always something, nothing's for free. Everything costs something. And maybe you're right. It is just a little bit less salary, but you get a happier life. And I think if were in the situation where you got paid more and someone told you, hey, you could pay, $5,000 a month and it's fun, but you'll be significantly happier. You'll have more time with your family. People would pay for that. But they don't realize, like, getting a pay cut is the same thing. You're paying for that happiness and paying for that opportunities that you may be missing somewhere else.
Yeah, and back to the spillover concept, you bring that person back to the house, you bring it back to your kids. They see it. I mean, the kids are amazing. They pick it up right away. They pick up what mood you're in. They pick up whether you've had a good day or not. Pick they pick up whether you're having a disagreement with your spouse. They pick that stuff up like instantaneously. So it makes a difference in their lives as well and your spouse's life. So it's not just you.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. When you're talking about like work and balancing work, and sometimes we don't have that opportunity to switch jobs maybe as frequently as or to a better place right away. And maybe we work in an environment that things get more stressful at times and slack at other times. When that happens and people get burned out a little bit, what are some things that we can do?
Yeah, avoiding burnout is something I've encountered a lot with people, and sometimes it's obvious. It's obvious to them. It's obvious to people around. Sometimes it's subtle and not so obvious. They're just the energy is not quite the same, or their attitude is just a little off. They're there, but they're not fully in. So checking into yourself, and maybe getting a little feedback from spouse or coworker, maybe a boss if you have a good relationship. So, what the answer I think is in general is you got to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
A lot of people say, "How could you, in your high pressured industry have not suffered through burnout. Everybody else left long ago. They made their money and now they can't wait to get out. And I said, no, well, I took care of myself by 1 day a week resting. Absolutely, absolutely, emphatically. And it's not that my brain stopped working. It's just that I wasn't going to the email. I wasn't shopping. I was enjoying my family. I was enjoying music. I was doing some dancing. So there are things I was taking care of myself every single week. Big, big moment. I took care of myself physically. In my 30s, early 30s, I became a runner because there was something to do right from the front door. I could do it first thing in the morning and then get into the office. I have a home office. So that worked out really well for me. Everybody has a slightly different pattern of when exercise works for them physically and in their schedules. And I'm a morning kind of exercise person. If it's not happening by like 9 or 10 o'clock, it's very unlikely to happen anytime the rest of the day. So
I think for me with exercise, one of the things that I think is, in my past life, it's like, I used to believe that you had to like schedule it. You had to do it a certain time and, either first thing in the morning or as soon as you get home from work. But what I realized, like, especially with me, I have ADHD. So sometimes it's, things can get a little crazy and I can get a little distracted and stuff like that. And what I found is that I can finish a call or a meeting and get up and do like, 25 push-ups or 50 push-ups or something like that, and a couple of squats. And then it just like refocuses me, recenters me. And by the end of the day, I'll have done 150 push-ups or 200 push-ups and got a good workout in during the day at work while like, regaining my focus and getting back into a work mode instead of being distracted on something else.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good, John. For me, it's about stretching, getting out of the chair, lifting up. It's not so much strength. This is just kind of moving my upper body and also breathing. Oh my gosh, when I'm really pounding away at something, I realize, wow, I'm not quite holding my breath, but almost.
Mhm.
So just take a deep breath of air, open up my chest, my lungs. That's a really good thing. But there's one thing that we haven't talked about yet with this avoid burnout, and that is, and again, it's easy to say, but it's doable, and that is be involved with work you like, that you're good at. Because I think it's impossible to like work that you're not good at, frankly.
Mhm.
So, like the work you do a good job with it, enjoy your coworkers, get to know them a little bit. Even if they're not the people you want to go on vacation with, you are working with them. How was their weekend? What's going on with their kids? Ask them questions, get to know them. Um, and by creating a work environment that way, managing up, if you need something, go talk to your boss. Say, I could do a better job. I could do a better job. I could be more effective if I had these resources. That's something that we could talk about. And he or she may say, it's not in the cards. Well, okay. So pay attention to that. Don't complain. Don't keep pursuing it. Wait for another time. Or maybe in some cases you need to shift groups. Sometimes it's the wrong boss, the wrong group. The work you're doing is not really the work, but there's another group in the same company that could be great for you. So, loving what you do, being good at it is another huge ingredient to avoiding burnout. Then it's not work. It's not work. It's with that 4-letter word.
Yeah, and sometimes it's it's just a matter of refocusing your perspective. Like one example, I was managing a team of web and mobile developers. This is more than a decade ago, and I noticed that we weren't doing our best work, and most people weren't excited about like some of the requests coming in from the business. To like move a button here and there on a page and things like that. And I had just finished reading Dan Pink's book, Drive, which he talks about, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I decided that I was going to take the next request that came into our team and like reframe it in a way that gave purpose behind it. And it took some work to do. It wasn't like as simple as just telling, a quick little story. But the request was that they wanted to move a button on the bottom of one of our mobile apps to close tickets from the bottom to the top.
Yeah.
And it made no sense to me of why you would want to do that, but that was the request. So I started asking why and figuring out why. And it turns out that the technicians at the end of the day, they would, they would drive around to 12, 15 different houses and do their job. And they never would close out the tickets by clicking that button until the end of the day because they wanted to make sure everything was done. The customer didn't call them back and say, hey, it's still not working, something else happened or whatever. So they waited until the end of the day. They would drive back into the office parking lot and they would open up every ticket, scroll down through all the tabs at the bottom and click on the button. And when I heard this, I was like, well, we can do you one better. We can do a mass close to close all the tickets for that day in one step. And so I went to my team and I told them, this is what the technicians are doing. And I said, so what we want to do is to give all the technicians about 15 or 20 minutes back with their family so they can leave work, 15 to 20 minutes earlier, have time to spend with their family instead of spending 15 or 20 minutes scrolling and clicking on little buttons at the bottom. And it's not about moving the buttons. It's about giving time back and, just reframing the request in a way that gives purpose behind it. I've never seen my team work so hard, and have so much excitement about it.
Beautiful story, John. That's a really great story. I think it makes me think of the importance of being curious and asking questions. Sometimes that's just so overlooked, but to understand what the nature of the problem is, why somebody's proposing something, just understand what their resistance is. But ask it openly. Don't say, "Why do you want to do that? That's such a stupid idea." No, you got to say, "Hey, I'm curious. Why are you thinking that would be a good idea?" And you hold it there. It's the respect that comes back to you, the respect you're giving by asking that question, and the solutions that can come out of it by that kind of engagement. Just enormously important.
Yeah, and another thing you mentioned just a second ago about how you need to be good at what you do, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people get, complacent. You get stuck in a rut where you're doing the same thing and you're not, learning more and more and having that journey of learning. And that's one thing that I think kind of goes back to the Dan Pink book. He talked about purpose, but mastery was another one. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and having that mastery and being able to continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to get better at things is something important. How can people continue their efforts in being lifelong learners?
Well, what I think I've seen again and again is that people, as you were saying, they sort of get in a rut. So they're familiar with how to do this particular thing, but the next thing is new. Maybe they don't have the full confidence to say, "Okay, I don't know it all now, but I will learn it. I will keep at it until I get really good at it. I mean, proficient." Mastery level stuff. So it takes a little bit of risk. You got to say, I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to give myself the time that I'll take. If my boss is involved, I'll tell him, "Hey, I'm going to work at this diligently, but it may take several weeks or maybe even a couple of months before we can get this all squared away at the level you want, and I want to make this good." So risk taking is part of it. Being willing to say, "Hey, I know this, but I don't know that." The the world is changing. Everybody knows the world is changing very quickly, and within the world is us. We are changing too. And so, at some point, you say, "Boy, that's just so boring. I've been doing that for a long time." That's going to lead to some deflation. So that's the time to sort of say, "Hey, when can I take on something new?" And that could be in your personal life. Maybe it's just some other stuff you're reading at home or something you're doing or conversations you're having with in your family or with friends. But it certainly happens at the workplace. And this is where curiosity can play in too. "Hey, that's interesting. I see you're doing it this way. That's not my department. It's not my work. But tell me more about why you approach that situation that way. And be curious." So it just makes for life becoming an adventure. Life is much more enjoyable if you're curious and you take on things as a lifelong learner. And you can learn things all the way to the end, all the way into your career, all the way to the end of that job, all the way through to the end of life.
Yeah, for sure. And I have not seen things change as fast as they are right now in my lifetime for sure. And I imagine that this, you know, change with AI and newer technologies and things that are happening is going to continue at an accelerated pace to where all careers and all job functions are going to have to continue to evolve, and people are going to continue to have to learn, and not just focus on the skill that you're working on today, but what is it that you need to have next, and start looking into that. And some people that I've met get to the point where there's like, I don't want to learn anymore. I just want to like do this thing. What do you say to them to kind of get them moving?
Well, I'd want to ask a few more questions about why they're saying that, why they're doing that. It could be that their life is pretty complicated. Maybe things outside the work that's causing something. Maybe there's some illness. Maybe there's a parent or grandparents passed away. They're just emotionally just not fully charged up. It could be, and maybe they'll return at some point, and hopefully quickly. And with your encouragement, it'll happen faster. But some people get to the place where they're full up and they're really not wanting to go forward. So you have to have a conversation. If it's you that's happening to you, you have a conversation with yourself. Is this really what I want to be doing? Do I want to be this kind of, I'll call it flat? Is that really who I am? And if the answer is yes, then you say, well, okay, what's the consequence for me of me staying this way? This is going to change my review. I got to be watching this, so I don't want to have bad repercussions from me being unwilling to learn, to take on new things, to experiment. I think sometimes people get stuck because they don't realize that life is just one series of experiments after another, and they don't all work. They don't all work the first time around. So you got to stay with it. You got to have grit, and you can't be afraid. And you gotta also realize that there's a lot of messaging out there that's very cynical, like AI is bad or something like that, right? And you just got to say, well, of course, nothing is 100% great, but there are many, many good parts of this. And that's the part I'm going to focus on. That's the part I'm going to contribute to. And hopefully that approach to your mindset kind of thing will let you engage in the parts that really make it good and effective for you.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think asking those additional questions, kind of like what you mentioned before, is really important. But also understanding that everybody's different, and you
Right.
know, and kind of moving on from there. I think it's important too, and seeing what is the hang up, and what is slowing you down, and you know maybe maybe it needs more discussion, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Well, that's right. And who, depending on who you're having the conversation with, spouse or
Yes.
coworker or boss, sometimes those conversations can be make the problem worse
Yeah.
because they're not trying to understand. They're trying to fix you. They're trying to
Mhm.
correct you. They're complaining about you in a certain kind of way. And at the wrong time in the wrong way, that can just make things feel that much worse and not help. So it's been a little bit of a a program I've had with my wife, with all the talking, all the speaking, the public engagement I've had with my book Thriving. There are times when she'll say to me, "Yeah, that was good, and you could have done this or you could have done that." And I appreciate very much what she's trying to do, but it doesn't feel very supportive at the moment. For that moment, I want her to say, wow, if you think about where you were a year ago and where you are now, this is just amazing. You should take a moment to celebrate. And when I do, and I celebrate it, then she'd say, hey, did you notice this about it? And ask me a question, not say you didn't do this. That would help me a lot. And I'm trying to coach her into that. And we're making progress.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think knowing who you're talking to is really important. I think that's a you know a good thing to kind of keep focused and keep on board with your audience, because sometimes it's your children, sometimes it's your
Yeah.
coworkers, and you just got to know what that next step is, and I think that's important. Um, when it comes to avoiding burnout and being a lifelong learner, what are some other things that we as employees and leaders and managers need to do to kind of help um, our team and ourselves become more successful?
Mm. Wow. How long has this podcast been?
Well, kind of few more minutes.
Well, I think it's all about the enabling, all about the enabling, the connecting the talent and skills and energy to the task at hand. It takes good communication. This is one of the central jobs of the manager, and the management and leadership are different. I think we talked about that a little bit last time. You know, the leadership function is the vision. It's creating alignments, creating some culture. The management is the getting the task done, in a way that gets the people in the right place at the right time, and then reassigning from time to time when you need to do that, adjusting things so that the work does get done in the way everybody's hoping and the company's hoping to have happen. So, there's a whole lot to this. This is why there are hundreds and hundreds of books written about managing and leading. Um, I think part of this is just infusing some honesty and courage. I've had to in my career had to let some people go, and people thank me. And to me at first I was really anxious about those conversations. I was pretty clear they needed to go, but they were good people. They were trying hard. They were just the wrong person for at the wrong place, and I didn't have another place to put them. So I had the conversation that started off with, well, what do you think the job skills are here? And I'd let them talk. I'd listen to them, and I'd say that yes, that's really right. And I think I'd add this and this also. Do you agree? And they say, oh yes, you're right. I should add those things. And I said, well, tell me what you think. How well are you doing with those things? Are you doing a really great job? Are you doing B plus, A minus, or more? And they go, no, I got to be honest, I'm not. I'm not. And I go, we've talked about this a little before. Is there something more I can help you with? And I go, this is on me. I'm just not there. I can't get it. I can't work fast enough, whatever. And I said, I know you're a talented person. I know you have a lot to offer. And I want to help you find a place where you can do that and you can thrive. You shine your full light. Would you let me help you? And they go, would you? Thank you. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you whatever 60 days. I'm going to connect you with some people, but then, it's time for you to, move to that new position. And, it's like, wow, thank you so much, because they know that it's not been right. And they look forward to the possibility of being in a situation that's really great for them.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's important to to have those kind of conversations and offer help. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of leaders fall short at is they'll have the conversation about the person not meeting expectations. They won't ask all the questions. They'll just kind of state the statements, and rarely do they offer genuine help. And I think that's one of the areas that we as leaders fall short.
Well, it can be a little bit of a risky proposition. Where are the boundaries on that? If the person needs help that you simply can't give them, what do you do? What if they bring up something like, well, everything's great except you? You're a bad boss.
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
Right? I mean, these are things that you got to be prepared to come. You can't react. You cannot react in a negative way. You got to take a breath. You got to say, I hear what you're saying, and I probably have some more questions. Maybe we should, both chew on this and then revisit this tomorrow or the next day. When we can kind of, engage on it on a productive, constructive level.
Mm. No.
Sometimes we want to rush things through. the hardest part, I think, for a lot of people, it's not the work, it's the relationships, and especially with the boss, and the lack of communication, lack of support they feel. And this is if that's true, it's my observation that it is true, then it takes a lot of emotional intelligence, takes a lot of courage, it takes honesty. I remember my first sabbatical, and this is also part of avoiding burnout. I went to my boss. I'd been preparing, and I told my wife, "Okay, today I'm going to go talk to the boss, and I'm going to tell him that I want to take 4 months off." And I had a reason, and I was prepared to resign. I was prepared to go back to my office, write the resignation letter. And instead, what he said is, "Absolutely. I hear what you're saying. I'm glad to support you. Would you like us to continue your salary while you're away?" I was
Wow.
gobsmacked. I was shocked. I said, "No, no, I would appreciate the benefits being kept, and insurance and so on, because I'll be doing a little bit of traveling." And he said, "I knew you'd say that. That's the kind of person you are. So yes, you'll get all those benefits. You don't have to worry about a thing. Um, Let us know when you'll be back. Of course, your office will be here, all that kind of stuff." And I went back to I think, yep. I went back to my office. I called my wife, and I was silent. I couldn't talk. She says, "Are you there? Are you there?" I said, "I got the biggest surprise. He completely accepted my proposal." So it was amazing. But
Awesome.
sometimes you gotta do what you need to do, and be prepared, be strong enough to say, "Okay, I'm ready to do this if that doesn't turn out."
Yeah, but I think part of that you need to I think people need to understand is that, what your boss said is that because that's the kind of person you are, and you had built up that social capital over time by being an honest, good employee, having open communication and building a relationship with him prior to that. Because you can't just go in with no relationship and no trust and say, "Hey, I'm going to take 4 months off," and expect, that to go over well. But you built up that over time. And I think that's an important part that needs to be, talked about.
Well, you just touched on a huge topic, a hugely important topic, which is building relationships.
Mhm.
You know, we don't take courses, on the job site. I mean, maybe some companies do a bit of that. I'm guessing that that's happening more and more at some companies. But I maybe there are courses in college or wherever that have relationship building things. There are certainly books about that, but building social capital, building communication lines, building trust and respect. These are doable things, but
Mhm.
it takes you being willing to step forward, willing to invest the time with the boss, invest the time with the coworkers. You're investing time with hopefully your spouse and your family, your children, whatever. So it's just a slightly different version of that. Maybe you don't have all the power, or all the cards in your hand when you're doing it. That's just the nature of that game. So you got to do it. Investing in those ways produces huge returns.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Um, so what are some other things that we need to talk about before we wrap this up today that we want to make sure we get off your chest and make sure it's communicated to everybody to help people become better at work, better at life, and have a happier time while doing it.
Well, I want to quickly, on our remaining time, John, touch on two topics here. One is success. What does success mean? And you know, we're living in a world, and it's not just a U.S. thing. It's really increasingly around the world that success is defined as a monetary thing. It's how big your bank account is, or what kind of car you're driving, that kind of stuff. And it relates very much to, do you have enough? And the answer is that if you look externally, the answer will always be evading you. You'll
Mm.
be dissatisfied. You'll not have enough. If you look internally, you have an internal measure of these things that are important to you, your family, what you stand for, your values. Then you can calibrate that. You can work towards your goals. You can feel successful. You can be the kind of person you want to be. And your bank account may not be the same bank account, but you're the better person for it all. So I just want to send out the message. You can define success your way. Absolutely. And that could be a firm rejection of a lot of things you're seeing around you, whether it's material things or how you're spending your time. So I just want to encourage people about that. And when you have enough, you fill the internal tank, and it can be overflowing. If you're ignoring those kinds of really important things, you're ignoring your values and so on, you can deplete yourself, and that leads to a lot of problems. The other topic I wanted to quickly touch on is transitions. Um, Life is full of these. Life is full of beginnings and endings, and in the middle are those transitions. They have to do with relationships that we have. People pass away. People move. When you change jobs, maybe a lot of the people that you used to work with, you're not in touch with anymore. Uh, they're just transitions to enormous, you changing jobs, you're changing, maybe a divorce, moves to a place you don't have any idea what's going on in this place. It's different weather, it's different food, it's different accents. My gosh, there's just so many things coming at you. And so transitions are all the time kinds of things in our lives. And sometimes we see them closely because they're big, they're obvious, and sometimes they're a little more subtle. So how do you deal with that? Well, it takes a few things. You got to have resilience like a rubber ball, not a bowling ball. The rubber ball bounces. It sort of has an impact. It deflates. If you're watching in really slow motion, you probably see it deflate a little bit, then to bounce back. That's the kind of thing. You want to be mentally tough to get through transitions. The metal ball, the bowling ball, goes clunk, and it makes a dent in the floor, and it does not bounce, it rolls. That's not what you want to be happening. You want to have resilience, you want to have mental toughness and grit. It takes courage and honesty. You got to say, I was not good at this. I was good at this part of it, but not all of it. And so I'm willing to move on, to say goodbye to the bad stuff, the bad boss, the work I didn't like. And now I'm moving forward to something that I am looking forward to. I have to learn a bunch. I'm prepared to do that. I'm going to be energized around that. I'm going to garner the support I need from people, friends, family, spouse. So sometimes there's a whole cycle that goes through in a transition. There's studies about this, and I write about this in my book as well. You start often with fear. Oh my God, I'm leaving this relationship. I'm leaving this work. If you're not making the choice about it yourself, but somebody's making that choice for you, you could start with anger. You could fill up with a lot of negative stuff, and the anger to fear. And at some point you shift. It might take a little time. You turn to a place of openness. Oh, what is this? Oh, I hear there's really kind of yummy pizza over there in Chicago. Deep dish pizza. Okay, that could be fine. I love pizza. So I don't know that pizza. That'd be good. And wind, hell, what I can deal with wind. So you move to a place of openness. Then finally you get to a place of excitement where you're leaning in. You're saying, I'm gonna make the best of this. I'm going to go into this new thing, and it may not last forever. I'm hoping it's going to last 3, 5 or more years, but I'm going to give it a whirl, and it may need another transition. That's okay. I'm in the game here.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's an attitude, a lot of attitude here.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is, you're right, just attitude, thinking things through a little bit, having a different perspective if you need to, like shift the lens off of, woe is me and fear, and look at the opportunities and the positive side of things, if you will. And I think that's really good. I like what you're saying there. And you mentioned that there's more about this in your book. How can people connect with you online and pick up a copy of that?
No, thanks very much, John. Yeah. So the book, Thriving, How to Create a Healthier, Happier, and More Prosperous Life, is available everywhere. It's on Amazon, of course, with a nice author central page. giving a lot of description and stuff, a lot of reviews. There's you can go to my book website, www.randselig.com. You can go to my LinkedIn page, some additionally good. And there's 68 now podcasts up and running. Great podcasts like yours, John. You can just Google me, Google Rand Selig. And what's nice about the Googling thing is you see it within a few words, whether it's more business-like podcasts or whether it's more in some element of self-care or being positive or what have you. So you say, oh yeah, this is the one I want to be listening to next. So there's lots of ways to dial into this. But I really hope I wrote this book. I'm out there talking to a lot of people because I really want to inspire and encourage people to get on this path that I know is completely possible if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll link that too in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go there and click through. And I did notice, 4.8 stars of a lot of reviews on Amazon. Really, really good job. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just noticed Amazon has a new algorithm. I have to talk to you more about this. They from time to time take out a review. Now I haven't gone through because there's so many of them. There's over 250 when I combine all my review sites. And but Amazon will remove a review. And I just Googled that. I said, what's going on? Well, they have an algorithm that says, oh, it's written by somebody they think is a family member, or they think it was written by AI. There are other things they're doing that takes reviews off. And I go, oh, come on. These are good reviews. They're honest. They're legit.
Well, Rand, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate talking to you. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.